At a high level, I wanted to share that we have the city demonstration investment in Lusaka. We funded a lot of that WISP work that was mentioned in the video several years ago, and currently we're supporting the city to stand up their CWIS program. We're also supporting NOASCO, and I say we are doing that because that's the money that we're funding. I want to be very clear that there are a lot of actors in Lusaka, and Lusaka Water and Sewerage Company among them. We're supporting them with financial resources. Lusaka's Water and Sewerage, now Water and Sanitation, is the agent here, and so when I say we, it's because I'm navel gazing and totally self-centered on this, but so I shouldn't say that. But in terms of where why I know Lusaka, it's because we're putting money there. But these are the folks who are doing the work on this left-hand side. We have the city that's at the city level. The utility is really demonstrating how to roll out a CWIS program. At the national level, they have a national regulator and a ministry that works really closely together to support all of those, help embed those functions into the national institutional framework. And that institutionalization is what allows it's what allows the Lusaka utility to have the mandate to work on sanitation and not just sewerage. And it's the accountability mechanism that Lusaka must report to against their ability to achieve that mandate. And NOASCO also plays another important role in approving tariffs. And so if Lusaka's, I'm just going to call them LWSC, if LWSC is not achieving their service outcomes, their ability to continue raising revenue from their sanitation surcharge, their ability to continue asking for tariff hikes, that's limited by NOASCO until they start performing better. And that's a really important function for NOASCO to play because it does incentivize the Lusaka LWSC, and they might not otherwise have an incentive to really be investing in this area of their business lines, when we all know that water is kind of what drives a lot of political conversations, more so than sanitation in low-income communities. And so maybe just to flag, you know, when their mandate shifted from serving just 15% of the city with sewerage to 100% of the city with sanitation. That transition, I think, is worth discussing a little bit. When you look down at the bottom at kind of lessons and scaling partners, this development partners section is really important. There are development partners who worked with LWSC to figure out, before they had the mandate, how this could possibly work. And that's a really important role for development partners to play in transitioning a city from doing one thing to doing another thing, from doing just sewerage to doing sanitation, in a lot of cases from just doing water to doing sanitation. Having a partner who can work on research and innovation with the city government is critical. Getting that partnership right so that the development partner is always supporting the city and not doing the work and generating the quote unquote answers or the solutions that can then be handed to the city is absolutely paramount in all of our cities. If that doesn't go well, we know that any results are going to be projectized. The support has to be still support for an authority with a mandate to deliver services and an interest in delivering those services. Going back to the city demonstration, a couple other points that I wanted to call out from this. I think the video did a great job at highlighting how awesome it is that Lusaka has an opportunity to scale services. I think I want to be very clear about, and I love working in Lusaka because they're very transparent about failures and struggles. The fecal sludge treatment plants in those videos don't work right now. They weren't designed for the amount of trash that came out of the pits, and the lack of water that was available for the treatment facilities. And at that point, there weren't good incentives. They also had biogas digesters, which absolutely did not work with trash. And so they're having to redesign all of those FSTPs. There was a long period where after that the sector was organized, emptiers were dumping directly into the sewage drains without any filters at all, without any grit filters or any formal organization for dumping. They just dumped right into a decanting, well, I guess a manhole. It wasn't even really a decanting station, just access to the sewers. So even when you have good models that are demonstrated and components of models that are demonstrated, actually turning those pilots into full services takes a long time, and you go forward and then you go backwards and then you go forward again, or you might go forward on one thing and you're going backwards on something else. So they got all of these emptiers organized and had a whole lot of sludge and it hung up all of their treatment plants. And so I think it's really important to, just an important lesson is that getting a successful pilot or getting a successful tool doesn't mean that you have a solution. And that's something that we've struggled to learn at the foundation as well. We actually framed all of our CWIS work as this goal to develop a bunch of city tools that we could then replicate in the world, or that the world could then like magically replicate. But they aren't solutions aren't magic bunnies. They're just effort to solve problems. And the number of problems that any given city has is a lot. And so you really have to have a system that incentivizes that city to problem solve. And if you don't have those functions in place, you don't have an incentive system for problem solving. And then you can have a million great models and tools and products, but you don't get to services. And so I think that's, I think it's a super important lesson across all of the work that we're doing. And I think Lusaka would be the first ones to say, excuse me, share the same. I think then, so one of the things that we're funding Lusaka to do is to hire, before they had board approval, to staff a CWIS unit or for FSM. We funded them to have to basically allocate some of their existing staff to this work, so that those people could learn with large bank projects. They could learn with some of the NGOs that were doing some of the research. They could work directly with these partners that were trying to demonstrate models and were trying to demonstrate innovations and trying to fund pro-poor services, but they were all doing it outside of the utility. And so funding this unit to work with these development partners and finance partners to really understand what it would take to bring those lessons into the mainstream utilities service model has been critical. It doesn't always work, not just because LWSC is changing from kind of one creature to another creature. That takes a long time. It also doesn't work all the time because development partners have their own incentives and their own timelines and their own competitions with one another. And so I think it's important to map out kind of who has what incentives, and make sure that you always identify who has the incentive to move at the public sector level, and keep them in the forefront. And maybe I'm preaching to the choir if you all are government folks. I think maybe you've struggled with NGOs and donors like myself who have to and try to manage competing interests. I want to maybe make two more points before I move on. This mandate shift for Lusaka, to let one utility move from being a water and sewage company to a water and sanitation company, allows them to integrate all of their financing and planning for sanitation service outcomes in one place. We have another city where the mandate is split. Sewage is managed by a utility and on-site sanitation is managed by a city. They can't coordinate. And where the mandates run into one another, they haven't aligned directly on exactly that small point. And because that small point, there's not alignment on that one small point, it breaks both the ability for both entities to work to deliver non-sewage sanitation. So all of the pieces are in place. They can't align in this one sliver of interaction, and it breaks the entire system. So having this integrated approach is really valuable. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the same entity. It can still be a split mandate, but the oversight to ensure that the outcomes still prevail and the coordination is there has to come from somewhere. And then I think the other point is to share maybe what NOASCO is. NOASCO is their national regulator, just like an energy regulator or telecoms regulator. They have NOASCO that regulates their water and sanitation services. So NOASCO sets their mandate, it sets their KPIs, and it sets their targets. And one of the things that NOASCO is doing now that Lusaka Water has moved forward for a few years, they're bringing that mandate and the KPIs and targets to all of the other utilities. They're coordinating the learning and not only providing incentives to perform, but also providing support to perform against that mandate. And they're doing it in an incremental way that facilitates transition and doesn't facilitate and doesn't shut down performance. If you set your goals too high, then and people aren't helped to achieve them, then you can stall your performance as well. So I wanted to call out those two things because that regulator utility model is I think not universal and maybe a little bit different, but it's in Zambia. It's the key to I think knowing that when our project is done or when any of these other development partners projects are done, NOASCO is still there to continue to incentivize the utility. The utility is still there with a ring-fenced revenue stream to continue delivering services, and they're accountable to NOASCO, and that makes a really big difference in the viability of and the value of what we're investing in. So I'm not going to go through these lessons. You guys can have these slides for later, I think. I wanted to call out, I think we're over time. I wanted to call out that we are compiling lessons from all of the cities that we're working in on CWIS and at cwiscities.com. And soon we'll also have here links to other CWIS initiatives at the World Bank, at ADB, and at other development partners work. So you'll be able to find a lot of learning from early models and early efforts on CWIS, hopefully in an accessible way. That's it.